So, what if I told you that the absolute fastest way to succeed is to fail? I know, it sounds completely backwards, but in the world of high-stakes innovation, it's actually a core engineering principle. We're going to dive in and explore why accelerating failure isn't just some quirky idea. It's pretty much the only real path to accelerating learning and, yeah, ultimately, success.
Here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll look at this weird problem every innovator runs into, the innovation paradox. Then we'll dig into the real reason it's a problem, our fear of failure. After that, we get to the good stuff, the fail-fast solution, how you can actually plan for the unknown, and finally, why culture, above all else, is the key to making any of this work.
Let's just kick things off with this idea from Tim Harford, because it really flips everything we think we know on its head. See, failure isn't the opposite of success, it's a critical ingredient. It's the engine that powers learning, and learning is what drives any real improvement.
Okay, so here's the paradox, the central problem that basically every company faces. You've got leadership demanding huge breakthroughs, and they want them on a super aggressive schedule. But the reality? Creating something genuinely new is messy. It's unpredictable. It's just full of unknowns. You're basically being asked to invent something on a deadline.
And that pressure, it leads to this really toxic situation, fueled by things like the sunk cost fallacy. We've already spent so much, we can't stop now. This creates what we call zombie projects. These things have already missed their window of opportunity, but they just keep shuffling along, sucking up money, resources, and your best people. And because they refuse to die, they end up dragging other, more promising projects down with them. It's a total downward spiral.
Which of course brings us to the million-dollar question. If a project is so obviously a zombie, why doesn't somebody just pull the plug? Well, the answer gets right to the heart of how organizations and people really work. It really just boils down to one thing: fear. Most of us, and by extension most companies, do not react well to the idea of making a mistake. We're kind of hardwired to avoid it, and our corporate structures, they often just make that instinct even worse.
This is how you end up with a failure-unfriendly culture. In these places, admitting a project has a problem isn't seen as a useful data point, it's treated as a personal failure. Having to fix it can be career suicide. So, what's the safer option? You hide the problems, you deny reality, and you just hope for some kind of miracle. And this kind of culture, it's often driven from the very top. Leadership gets caught in this reality distortion trap, where they believe if they just set an impossibly high bar, people will magically figure out how to jump that high. They ignore the basic physics of a problem because, well, it contradicts the quarterly goals they promised. And the result is you have two completely different realities trying to exist at the same time. You've got the CEO's target date, which is all about market pressure, and then you have the team's actual schedule, which is based on, the actual work. This forces everyone into playing this ridiculous schedule game, pretending they can hit a target they know is impossible from day one. So how do we break out of this crazy, destructive cycle? Well, we have to flip the entire script. All that fear we were just talking about, that is precisely what holds innovation back. So instead of avoiding failure, we embrace it. We use it as a tool. This is the fail-fast solution. The idea is simple, but it's so powerful. Since learning only happens when we fail, the key to innovating faster is to fail faster. And the core engine for making this happen is the learning cycle. You can think of it as the fundamental unit of progress. It's a structured way to not just deal with failure, but to actually generate it on purpose, analyze it, and squeeze every drop of useful knowledge out of it as quickly as humanly possible. The process itself is actually pretty simple. First, you plan an experiment to test out an idea. Then you do it. You run the experiment. Next, you check the results, and you're looking specifically for what went wrong, the failure. And finally, you act on what you just learned, making corrections before you start the whole loop over again. It's that rapid cycle that really drives progress. And here, you can really see the difference it makes. Slow teams are terrified of failure, right? So they spend forever on one giant, high-stakes, big bang cycle, trying to get it perfect from the start. But fast teams, they run tons of little, rapid, do it, try it, fix it cycles. They can get 3, 4, maybe even 5 learning cycles done in the time it takes a slow team to do just one.
Okay, I get it. This all sounds great in theory, but you're probably thinking, how on earth do you put failure on a project plan? How do you schedule for something you don't even know? That's where we get into the practical side of this, a real framework for planning the unplannable.
Believe it or not, you can actually estimate the unknown. By just categorizing how hard a problem is, you can get a pretty good guess at how many of these learning cycles it's going to take.
To solve it, an easy problem might just be 1 or 2 cycles. Something really, really difficult, that could take 6, 7, 8 cycles. Suddenly, I don't know becomes a number you can actually plan around.
Now, here's something that's absolutely crucial to understand. Most so-called innovation projects aren't 100% new. In reality, it's usually only about 10% of the work that's truly innovative and unknown. The other 90%? That's stuff the team has probably done a dozen times before. The secret is to not let that risky 10% take the predictable 90% hostage.
So this leads to a much smarter, reality-based way to plan things. You find that risky 10%, you isolate it, and you attack it first with your best people. This immediately forces everyone to acknowledge the real gap between the target date and a realistic schedule. And that gap? You use it to force all the hard, critical decisions and trade-offs at the beginning of a project, not in a complete panic at the very end.
But let me be perfectly clear about something. You can have the best processes in the world, the most clever planning tools, and they are all completely useless if you don't have the right environment. Culture isn't just a buzzword. It's the operating system that everything else runs on.
I mean, think about it. Without a solid foundation of trust and a truly shared goal, even a small, super-focused team can just fall into chaos. And as that team grows and you bring in people from other parts of the company, that original alignment can get lost really fast. Trust is the glue that holds the whole thing together.
So it really comes down to a choice between two very different cycles. A punishing culture creates this awful doom loop. Someone makes a mistake, they fail, they get punished, and so they learn to hide problems in the future. But a learning culture, it creates a virtuous cycle. People are encouraged to try things, they fix what's broken, they learn from it, and transparency is rewarded.
And look, this isn't just some abstract business concept. It's a fundamental principle of high performance in pretty much any field you can think of. Michael Jordan didn't become the greatest because he avoided failure. He succeeded because of his failures. Every single missed shot was just another learning cycle that made him better.
So if you take just one thing away from all of this, let it be this. A leader's most important job is to build an environment where failure gets a total rebrand, not as a mistake to be punished, but as the fastest, most effective way to learn. It's all about rewarding transparency over the illusion of perfection.
Let's end with one last, really powerful thought from Tim Harford. In an organization that's terrified of failure, you don't get bold successes. You just get mediocrity. Success and failure start to blur together because nobody is willing to take the risks necessary to do something great. So the final question is your organization built to learn, or is it just slumping toward mediocrity?